What's going on? You're in the Beat Sessions, your place for all things music. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Let's talk about Arcade Fire and this new record, Pink Elephant. They released that on May 9th. This is the seventh studio album for the Canadian rockers and their follow-up to 2022's We. Pink Elephant, I think, should be maybe called White Elephant, or perhaps even more appropriate, The Death of a Dream. And while that might seem a little dramatic, that's what I feel when I listen to this album. The promise and ambition of one of the most ebullient and innovative groups of the 21st century has all but vanished with this project. And Arcade Fire did not build its reputation by simply being just one of the preeminent indie rock bands on the scene. At the height of their success, they truly were the image of what any successful musical act wanted to emulate. I think that their unique style of rock and roll was unlike anything out there. And their early work was, and still is for that matter, invigorating and galvanizing in ways that very few musicians are able to harness with their art. And for me, dropping the needle on records like Funeral, Neon Bible, especially The Suburbs, it still feels like kindling a spark that sets my soul on fire. And for a moment, it felt like with the release of 2022's We, that there was the potential for this outfit to find that footing once more, to create the type of grandiose and meditative rock that gleefully invites its listener to ponder the modern world without admonishing them in the process, because we're all guilty of indulging in the modern world. It's nice to be checked on it from time to time, though. And I think one of the most attractive qualities of this band is the exploration of thematic elements that center on constructively critiquing social norms, with their brilliant music kind of functioning as a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. But as Pink Elephant demonstrates, the panache is just all but vanished. And it pains me to say it because there was a time when Arcade Fire was one of my favorite bands. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who've made that statement at some point in their lifetime. But it's been over a decade since the beauty of The Suburbs. And as crazy as it is to think about it, it's been over 20 years since they rocked our worlds with Funeral. I will say that I think Reflector is a fine record, but it is also a solid example of when something becomes too much of a good thing. I do think that record is kind of bloated. And following that album, there's been very little that has stoked the authenticity of their original fire. This band has got some challenges. I think the loss of Will Butler is massive for them and felt throughout the entirety of Pink Elephant. He's an incredible multi-instrumentalist, and I think this band is going to have a really tough time moving forward without him, not only in the studio, but also without his live energy. This man is electric on stage, and I think will be missed in that capacity by fans and by the band. And when you listen to him on his most recent effort, especially with Sister Squares, you can hear a ton of similarities in the songwriting. But I think that those tracks exemplify a more disciplined approach to composition structure. 9 of the 14 songs fall into that 3-minute and 30-second range or less. It's an effort that is far from perfect, but fluff is not bogging it down the way that it has with these last few Arcade Fire records. I also think that the change in dynamic with Sarah Newfield has something to do with it. And admittedly, this is just an assumption of mine. I don't know everything about that dynamic there. And I know that she still tours with the band and contributes to studio albums, but there's a part of me that believes that she was a bigger part of their genius in the early years that led up to Reflector, when she was a core member, so to speak. And through those years, I genuinely believe her voice was heard in a way that had an impact on the quality of their sound. And with this argument, I would say its absence has been detrimental to the band as well. Speaking of voices, I can't get over the melodies on this record. In fact, all of the music on this record seems to exist in a bizarre state of restraint, which is not what this band does. And I mean, I guess you could try to argue that they're they're attempting to do something different in that regard, but I think that it hinders what these compositions could be. This is a band that is used, they've taken their sound to like the greatest heights in all the right ways possible that a band can, and it just seems like between personnel issues and personal issues that they're just so grounded and stuck right now. Pink Elephant is co-produced by Daniel Lanois, who has worked with Bob Dylan, U2, Brian Eno, amongst many others. He's an absolute genius. But I would say that you could add his name to a legendary group of names that become a puzzling pattern for this band. And Arcade Fire has spent the last decade bringing in heavy hitters to co-produce, and I think that maybe is one of the problems here. I think that bringing in Nigel Godrich for We thankfully worked in their favor to some degree, but collaborations with Thomas Bangalter of Daft Punk and Steve Mackey on Everything Now, and then with James Murphy on Reflector, those are efforts that I feel in a lot of ways witnessed the band lose its identity and the predilections of its collaborators. And don't get me wrong, like I said, I think Reflector is a brilliant record. Marcus Dravs contributing a good deal of production, and especially coming off his work with the band on The Suburbs. But it unfortunately, I think, Reflector sowed the seeds of what was to follow. And I think that's a carnal lust for all things electronic and disco. We all see the band credited for songwriting on Everything Now, with Sarah no longer being at the core especially. But like, I really wonder if Wynn and Regine, like, I really wonder when they started actually taking over at this juncture, because now they're the only ones credited for songwriting. And from a lyrical standpoint, those records, and especially this new record, they tread just the hollowed ground of their early work without any awareness of nuance to that work. I mean, I would say to its credit, at least Pink Elephant attempts to tread lightly in the lyrics of the band's early work, instead of just stomping them out the way that Everything did now. But this record is also, I think it's a sad attempt to dig in thematically while obviously functioning as a means for Win Butler to acknowledge his recent transgressions without really showing any real feeling of compunction. And that's what makes this record weird. It feels like he's apologizing to everyone when, frankly, he really only needs to apologize to the victims of his bullshit. And you pay a therapist to listen to your problems, but here we all are buying into this baggage, and it bums me out. And unfortunately for Win, he's a guy that built a reputation on this pedestal of being slightly holier than thou, which really sucks for him at this point in his career. I think one of the most important elements of creating art is objectively seeking truth without using yourself as a poster person for that venture. It's his biggest failure in his career, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. And Pink Elephant could have been a moment to build something new, because I do believe that people deserve the opportunity for atonement. I do believe that people deserve a second chance. But with song titles like Circle of Trust, Year of the Snake, and the opener, Open Your Heart or Die Trying, which I think is just such a waste of 3 minutes, his goal it's very obvious and in a lot of ways completely self-indulgent. This thing opens with Open Your Heart or Die Trying. You get this slow synth fade in. It's mellow to open. Moments later, there's a jarring synth that is reminiscent of kind of like horror cinema. It's in and out, quick to leave, the mellow synth droning on its own. You get a second synth that works in, and it sounds like almost kind of like if an elephant could make an alarm noise with its trunk. It's subdued, but it invokes this feeling of dread. It's also builds into sci-fi territory, then fades at the halfway mark. Then the synths are going to build back with fuzzy textures that amp the intensity a bit and then fade out once more, transitioning into your next song, which is the title track, Pink Elephants. The song is going to open with light twinkling guitar, and you get this muted swimming vocal that opens with it as well. Guitar riff is going to take hold. You get a cymbal count that ushers in this mellow early 1990s alternative, kind of like Pavement kind of feel. Vocals in the verse mark a shift to minimalism, building to the rock elements of the open. And then that simple guitar lick and the big drums really carry in this track to kind of be the feature element. Chorus has this big shoegaze feel with dark droning synths that mingle in the background as well. The back end of the track, the song builds nicely in energy, and I would say to its strength, it does have a pretty solid finish. I do like the way that this song builds and finishes and leads into your third track, Year of the Snake. It's going to open with stomping percussion and an electric riff. The drums find a nice groove before Regine takes lead with the vocals on this one. A few lines pass before driving. Thumping bass is going to work in along with those hushed harmonies. And I do like this bit of the song, I will admit. Great lead riff on the track that does a great job of building tension as it slowly builds on this track. And it sounds like it's going to take off after about 2 minutes, but then it maintains that weird restraint that I mentioned. And I think this is a song that could have really benefited from a big moment of takeoff. But by the time it does actually get into that territory, it's too late. And I think the energy in the moment it doesn't feel right. I don't like the overall structure of the composition when it does go big. Circle of Trust is your fourth track. You get a light fade in with these clattering synths that seem like otherworldly. It opens up simple percussion and this throbbing synth bass element. It feels like industrial disco, honestly. Vocals are both hushed and restrained once more. Melodies are going to find some lighter ground with a bit of guitar, and then it's going to ride this back and forth between the verse and the chorus while slowly building over the course of 6 minutes. It never discovers any compelling ground, though. I feel this song has potential, but it could have been trimmed down. It doesn't need to be 6 minutes long. Feels like a lot of filler. Alienation is your fifth song. You get this playful staccato synth and hollow electro-percussive element that lead off. And this song feels like it could be fun. But then the verse hits and remains minimal with an obscured muted vocal. It hits with this driving percussion and big fuzzy bass that rolls along finally. I do like that. And takes off into chaos around the 2-minute mark. More of what I think this track should be delivering. It backs off momentarily, and then it's going to explode into blistering guitars and synths, It's a great track, but again, it doesn't feel quite right. Beyond Salvation is your sixth track. This is basically just an instrumental filler track once more. You get these obscured kind of vocals with this shifting synth play that, on a 10-track record, it doesn't feel necessary. Your seventh track, Ride or Die, get these light droning synths that usher in what sounds like a timpani and soft bounce of acoustic guitar strings. A bit of arpeggiation works in with Wynn's vocal on that guitar. And then that riff is going to find more form near about the minute mark in the chorus. It's going to revert back to that minimal feel for the second verse, and then the chorus does its thing once more while building a little bit of intensity with the vocals. Get these driving chords that make up the middle eight and build the song into some darker territory, and then back to the chorus for that coda. It's going to finish ultimately in the mellow way that it opens with this light droning synth that kind of fades out and transitions into your eighth song, I Love Her Shadow. This song opens with a thick pulsating synth. You get this bass-like tone in that instrumentation. Driving bass drum enters with the swirling icy synths that fade with the vocal. I dig when the snare comes into life. It's a really nice part of the song, kind of bringing the drums and the whole thing, the energy into it. You get this organ element that it almost kind of sounds like you're at a baseball game. It's going to work in briefly and then it bows out. Regine enters in about the 1:30 mark, and then the track picks up its energy. Different components are going to continue to move in and out with brief rolls in this song. You get these woodwind sounding elements that are pleasant in the back half of the track. The song it's definitely one of my personal favorites on the record. I think that it's a nice addition to this record. She Cries Diamond Rain is another kind of synth filler track for about a minute and a half. For a penultimate track, it's a bummer. It's going to lead into Stuck in My Head, which is your 10th and final song. Get these droning synths and electric guitar. They're going to slowly evolve into an acoustic riff with the stellar bass line. And I really like the tone of both of those guitars when they go to work. Drums build in and spend a few bars playing around before finding a nice groove. I like the build there. And this thing is going to build to a crescendo at about the 2/3 of the way through the song. And then when it drifts off, it takes a moment in quiet and then comes storming back to finish big. But another song that extends almost about 7 minutes, and it feels like it takes up so much time without really ever achieving and accomplishing much. And I kind of feel that way about the 42 minutes of this record. You ultimately have 7 songs on this brand new record. And me personally, like I appreciate a band trying to take an instrumental approach, and I wouldn't object to incorporating the style of some of those tracks. There's 3 instrumental tracks on this record, but they just, again, they feel like interludes. They don't really feel like thoughtful compositions that worked to say something without saying anything, which is unfortunate because I feel like when Win Butler is saying something on this record, it's just not amounting to much. It's not amounting to much sincerity. It's not amounting to much authenticity. And this record, I understand wanting to do something different with the band, wanting to try to take your sound in a different direction and not just do the same thing over and over again. I think this outfit has been exceptional with regards to that up until these last few records where, again, the kind of disco electronic flair has really just taken hold front and center. I mean, even on We, I mean, there's tracks that they start off feeling more kind of like that authentic Arcade Fire, and then for no apparent reason, we'll just go right into electronic disco dance territory. And it just, I feel like that musical element has had its moment with this band, and it's time for them to move on and do something different. And for the most part, they have with this project. But I think that ultimately what they're doing on this album, it isn't working for me. And I don't think it's working for the band. And I don't know. I just, it makes me sad to say that at this point in their career, I just don't think that this Arcade Fire record is really worth the time. I mean, it makes me sad to say it, but I'm going to give this thing a 5.5 out of 10. There's some bright moments. There's some decent instrumentation and some songs, some components of those tracks that show potential and are good to a degree, but ultimately I just think this thing comes together very weird and in kind of a shallow way that this is just kind of the shell of a band that once was very great. So if you give this thing a go, I hope you enjoy it as much as you possibly can. I hope you actually enjoy it to the fullest extent. If you're into this thing, let me know about it in the comments. Hope you find this review helpful, and please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We will see you next time on the Beat Sessions.